Baba Yaga.
This, man,
Whew.
I'm just going to say right away, this is a great card. Card draw.
Yeah, really give you a nice overview of all the starter decks, but also the factions themselves. Kind of give you a sense of playability, how fun the deck is, the themes, and maybe like the little nuances that we'll share with you on what we think is a good card. And what you'll actually see is in the bottom of, the bottom right of the screen, we'll have a little bar to kind of indicate, the level of buzz or kind of excitement that we have for the card. And that could, include a variety of things in terms of like how good the card is. But maybe we just think the card is cool and we think it's fun, right? So I think that's going to be a fun little thing for us to all sit here, and you can let us know what card you like the most for your respective faction.
Yeah, it's going to be subjective, obviously.
Yeah.
So if you guys disagree, feel free to let us know. We might be wrong.
We might be wrong. And Jan, why don't you let us know which color, which faction are we going to start with today?
So we're going to start with Yzmir, purple, which is my favorite faction.
Yep.
All right. So it's a wizard class, and there's a few different play styles. So every faction will have 3 heroes. However, for the starter decks, we're going to be focusing on the 1 hero. That's kind of the spotlight hero for set 1.
Yeah.
But you're not limited to that. So
the heroes will change somewhat of the play style of the deck.
For sure.
But for the most part, the theme and overall kind of, playability of the deck will remain fairly consistent. But the heroes can, and there's about 3 different heroes for each faction.
For each class. Yep.
Each class.
Yeah, so the starter decks comes with 40 cards. You get your hero, you get your 31 commons, and you get 8 rares.
Yep.
However, in a legal deck, you can change that ratio up a bit to have 15 rares, so you'll have less commons, and then you can also have 3 uniques.
Yep.
You won't be getting any uniques in the starter deck, because again, it's a starter deck. It's kind of meant to obviously introduce you to the game and the play style. And if you're not sure what deck to play, these videos are going to be great because you'll get kind of an overview of every deck, and then you can choose one to start and start diving deeper, right?
Perfect. Well, why don't we dive a little bit deeper now into Yzmir, or the purple faction?
Yeah. All right. So the starter hero for Yzmir is Akesha and Taru.
Yep.
All right. Here they are. So each hero will have a specific ability, and that ability kind of determines your archetype, which is kind of the play style of your deck and how you're going to want to build your deck in general. So let's read what this hero does, because that's the most important thing on this card. So this symbol here on the card means that you're going to exhaust it. Exhausting means you're using this ability. So once you exhaust it, you can't use it again for that day. So you'll be using this ability once per day.
And you physically turn the card to its side. And
Yeah.
if you played TCGs in the past, it's often referred to as tapping your card.
Right. So you can tap your hero power. So this one in particular, you can only activate if you're the first player. All right. So what it does is you end your turn as if you played a card, and you may still play a card later this day, right? So in Altered, you're playing cards until you can't play a card, at which point you'll pass. But this allows you, if you're the first player, instead of playing a card, you're literally saying, hey, I'll play after you. You'll let your opponent play.
See what they do first.
Exactly. See what they do first, and it gives you the ability to react. So in Altered, actually, for the most part, you're at an advantage playing second, because you're gaining more information about your opponent. You know which side of the expedition they played on, and that lets you make a better decision and be more reactive. Being reactive in this game is,
Yeah.
is really important. So with the after you ability, you can essentially go second every turn.
Yeah. I don't think I've played a Yzmir hero that has not used this on their turn, just because, you know, you get more information, kind of see where your opponent plays, and then you react. And to Jan's point, I think going second, reacting is a huge kind of advantage in this game. So Akesha and Taru, the cute little Cthulhu looking thing, is off to the right start.
Yeah, so also wanted to say one more thing about this ability. During the day, this doesn't have to be the first thing you do. So say you have more mana, you now have 6, 7 mana.
Right.
You can play a 1 mana character, which is kind of like a soft pass. You're only spending 1 mana.
Right.
Then your opponent can play, and then you can after you
Yeah.
kind of in the middle of the day versus at the beginning of the day. So you can use it quite strategically.
Very, yeah.
Because what you might want to do in the beginning of your turn, say you are going first, you might want to sabotage your opponent, right, before they get to play a card out of the reserve.
Yeah.
So you can sabotage, they will play, and then you can after you at that point. So really powerful ability. I love this. This is what I'm going to be playing a lot.
Yeah, let's you set up your turn.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. All right, so Akesha, really powerful hero. Let's see what the starter deck contains. Starting with Studious Disciple.
I mean, pretty standard kind of no frills. Got a bit of flavor text in there.
Yeah, so typically the way you want to think about it is when you're paying 1 mana, you're kind of expecting 1/1/1 worth of stats, right? So this you can see is a tiny bit understated, but you're getting a powerful quick ability from reserve. You can discard this card, and the next spell that you play will cost 1 less. So another way you can think of this card is you're paying 1, but then later on you're going to reduce a card's mana by 1. So you're almost paying 0 for this card.
Yeah.
Right? And also 1 mana characters are really important because they're so flexible. You only need 1 mana to play them. I mentioned before, you can kind of play it as like a soft pass. It's just 1 mana, then you can kind of react to your opponent really well. So,
And sometimes you just need 1 point to win the expedition. Right?
Yeah.
So they can definitely come in clutch.
yeah, if your opponent played on the companion side, you can just drop this on the hero side, even after you, right? See what you do. You played here. Okay, I'll just drop my little disciple here on this side. So I think this is a great card.
Bit of an investment though. You know, it's that 0 mana when it's in the
reserve,
in the reserve,
and
right,
and
so-
you sacrifice the ability to be able to replay him
Exactly,
out of
yeah.
reserve. But
Exactly.
I think it's a great card. There's not many 1-drops, 1 mana cards
Yeah.
in most factions, especially in Yzmir. So this is a card, even outside of the starter deck, you're probably going to be playing this card. So
Compared to the benchmark, the rest of the class.
yeah. So
Cool.
I think it's a great card. All right, Monolith Archivist. Defender. This is a defender. So the expedition that you play this card into is not going to be able to advance. And this card you'll see for 2 mana, you're getting 3/3/3. So it's actually overstated for the mana cost, but you're literally playing it as a defender. So you're just playing this to block your opponent.
Yeah. You want to be annoying. You don't want, you know, maybe you can't necessarily take that side of the board, but you don't want your opponent to either, or you want your opponent to commit more resources when they can't really, you know, devote the amount of mana to actually win it.
Yeah, it's a good defensive card, but it's exactly that, to where if this is the only character you have, you can't really advance your expedition with it, right? Like you're kind of forced to defend. So in that aspect, I don't like the card as much.
I don't think it's particularly that strong.
Yeah.
It can, you know, definitely spark a bit of conversation at the table and, you know, be a little bit of a pain for your opponent. It's like,
hey, that's what Akesha does best. You'll see, man. It's a whole
bit of
lot
stalling. Bit of stalling.
That's right. All right. Moving on to Tooth Fairy. This is
This is the rare though, right?
this is the rare, but all the rare does is it reduces the reserve cost
Yeah.
from 2 to 1. So otherwise you'd be paying 2/2.
Yeah.
So obviously it's a little bit understated for a 2 mana cost, but you're making that up in the effect, which is Sabotage,
Yeah.
which is super powerful because if your opponent has something in their reserve, particularly if it's something pretty good that you don't want them replaying,
Yeah.
you're going to sabotage them. And this is a good example of when you might not after you're going to want to sabotage them
Right.
first. And you're putting something small on the board, they'll react, and then you can kind of make a bigger play. But
Yeah, and kind of to your point earlier about how like you almost want the amount of kind of points you get for each, grass, mountain, water.
yeah,
This comes in slightly lower, but you get a really strong effect of sabotaging your opponent. So what you often find in cards like these is that the power level might not match your mana 1-to-1, but you get a really strong effect,
Yep.
right? If you sabotage something that's in your opponent's reserve that's really, really strong for 2 mana, well,
yeah. So you can think about you're paying 2 mana, 1 mana for 1/1/1, 1 mana for the sabotage, and then when you replay it coming out of reserve, you don't get the sabotage effect because it's only out of hand.
but
So
you get a standard 1/1/1.
then you're getting a 1/1/1 for 1 mana.
I think it's a great card. I think any card with sabotage right now,
Yeah.
low cost too.
Yeah.
Very good card.
I think
Very
it's a
good
great card.
Yeah.
All right. Ysmir Stargazer. So this is just a vanilla kind of card. It's a little bit understated for 2 mana, a little bit overstated for 1 mana. But as a net, I think you're gaining less value than what you're paying. It's 2 mana.
Net loss.
Yeah.
Net loss. Gazing into the stars too much. Yzmir Stargazer.
Yeah, this card is
You're a scholar. Why don't you put your time to studying books? You get some better stats than the 1/2/1 for 2 mana.
yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, not much more to say about this card. It's just
Yeah.
it's whatever. Lady of the Lake.
Okay.
Kind of similar to Stargazer. Has an extra stat point,
Yeah.
but focus in water, which if you're playing into
Yeah.
water, it kind of just balances the scales
Yeah.
to be able to win a water expedition. So
And you still, as far as pointage goes, like you still get, a kind of like 5 points worth of allocation
yes,
for 2 mana.
Yes.
Not the best, but I think a little bit better than Stargazer.
for sure. Standard you'd expect for 2, you'd expect 2/2, so 6 worth. You're getting 5 worth, so not bad. The trade-off is that it's concentrated in
Yeah.
water.
Art
So,
looks great though. So
yeah, art looks great for sure.
Fantastic.
And the rare and the unique looks really nice too.
Ooh,
Baba Yaga. This, man, I'm just going to say right away, this is a great card. Card draw, all right? Card
Yep.
draws, as you know, in any TCG,
Yeah.
card draw is important.
Yeah.
There's not many cards in Altered, especially as a common, that straight up give you a card draw.
Yeah.
Flat
It's
out.
huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
So, bit understated for 3, but drawing a card easily costs 1 mana.
Yeah.
You'll pay 1 mana any day to draw a card.
Yeah.
You're getting 2/1/2, so fair, right? You're kind of losing 1 stat point there, and then even to replay it for 2 mana, 2/1/2, that's fair.
Yep.
So
2/1/2, not bad. But really main purpose, draw that card. Let's get
draw that card, put a body on the board.
put a body on the board, get a bit of board presence, and work towards your win condition. So
Yeah.
I think fantastic card.
I think this card, it's just going to be in every
Yeah.
Ysmir deck.
Auto-
It doesn't
auto
matter.
include.
Yeah,
Auto
auto include, exactly. Okay, the rare version. So it's interesting because the rare version is a lot better, obviously, from a stat perspective. So for the starter deck, Baba Yaga was already a great card. This is an amazing card for a starter deck perspective.
Very
But
strong.
outside of the starter deck, it might not be a rare you include because the common's good enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Those rare slots are important.
Yeah.
So the common version is good enough, but this is in
You're
the
not
starter
playing
deck.
this card for the stats. You're playing it for the card draw.
Exactly.
Now, if the rare gave you draw 2 cards,
Exactly. Yeah.
Very different.
That would be very different.
but to take up a rare slot and get slightly better stats, that wasn't your goal when you play Baba Yaga. You're not playing it to take control of the board. You're playing it to get a card.
Yeah. I just want to compare the artwork real quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks cool.
Nice.
I like that. All right. Cardigan Alchemist. Man, one thing I really struggle with always is the pronunciations, and I find altered some of the cards.
Yeah.
The names are just like, I gotta really sound it out. All right, so this guy, you're getting the value that you're paying, right? You're paying 3 for a 1/1/1, but you're gaining 2 boosts out of hand, so you're getting a 3/3/3, and then out of reserve, you're paying 1 for 1/1/1. So, yeah, it's a decent card. It's nice that you can kind of play it as a 3 mana up front, and then you have now a 1 mana card that gives you fair value sitting in reserve. You know, again, you can use it as like a soft after you later on. I like this card.
I think it's okay.
Card.
Like, to be fair, like, you know, the ability is to just be what it should be.
Yes, it's not a true ability. It's
I feel like normally when you take a bit of a hit on the stats, you almost want the ability to make up for it. But the ability here just makes up for what it should be if it didn't have an ability.
Yep.
So I think it's okay.
Yeah.
I think it's okay.
Yeah, the thing is, this card fits really good into another hero because of its reduced stat cost out of reserve. So like in this deck, kind of how we're talking about, it's okay.
Sure.
But it shines in another hero. So
For sure.
All right, and this is the rare version. So here it is. The ability, you know, gives it an increased power level.
Exactly. So this would make it much better than
For
what it previously was.
You're paying 3 mana, but you're getting 4 mana worth of stats because it's going to be a 4/4/4. So, yeah, that's again good for this deck.
Right.
Pretty good. But outside of the starter deck, might be a card you look to replace with a better rare.
Yeah.
Alice.
Kind of like a little bit of the Lady of the Lake vibes, right?
Yeah,
You get
exactly.
a little bit stronger than a 1/1/3. You get a 2/2/4.
Exactly. Again, concentrated on water, so that's kind of the trade-off you're paying for. Slight understat, but really just by 1 point.
And you do get an extra after you, which, as we said, like after you is a very powerful effect for Yzmir.
Yeah.
So to have it baked into the card, like, this is better than Lady in the Lake because of that.
Yeah, it's a good option to have for sure, but you're not always going to use that after you because it's a pretty good body, right? Like, you're probably going to want to replay this onto the board, but having that after you, it's a good option.
Situational for sure. Situational, and it gives you options, so I think it's decent.
Yeah.
I think it's decent.
Yeah. Okay. Rare, Alice, so pretty much just increases the stats, so, you know, just a bigger body. Same thoughts, right?
Yeah, same thoughts. It doesn't really sway it either which way
Yeah,
for me.
yeah. So it's a good card for the starter deck. Dorothy Gale. This is a pretty good card. Pretty cool card, sorry. You're paying 5 mana. You're getting a 3/2/2. So obviously you're not getting your stats worth from what you're paying, but the effect is really powerful. You may send target character to reserve. So this is a really good effect because sometimes similar effects of this will specify you can only target a card that's less than 3 mana or more than 4 mana. It's a little more restrictive. Whereas this one, you can target anything. It can be a 10 mana card, right?
Yeah.
And you can send it to reserve. And sending it to reserve might not seem that good versus discarding it. However, if that card has fleeting, it will discard it.
Yeah. Or, and if you're thinking like I am, there's plenty of cards out there that can sabotage. So potentially a good combo move here, send a target to the reserve.
And then sabotage.
It, right?
Yeah, you can do that.
A lot of other decks, they have very, very strong, powerful cards. Like I'm thinking Druid and the green deck. And, you know, Muna will sometimes throw in a very big creature. And I've had things sent to the reserve and sabotaged. And, you know, it's kind of hard to gain momentum after that because you devote a lot of resources. And that's where, like, the combo of after you, like, what's your opponent doing? Are they setting up? Are they setting up? And then they set up and you pull out a card like Dorothy Gale. And bye-bye.
Also, the way you can play this card is, say your opponent invested, you know, most of their mana into a card, kind of like you said, they've played a big body, also a 5 or a 6.
Yep.
If you send it to reserve, chances are they're not going to be able to replay that card this turn. And you can also play this card into that expedition,
Yeah.
bounce that card out, and it gives you a much more favorable board presence. So it is a very strategic card.
Yeah.
I think, this is a great card. I think it's a really good card.
Yeah, and typically what you would be removing from the expedition is probably a powerful card. So even though a 3/2/2 might not seem very powerful for a 5 mana card, I'd be hard pressed if you bounce something to the reserve, your opponent being able to kind of come back from that and even have enough resources to beat a 3/2/2.
Yeah.
So 3/2/2 on a clear board after it's been played,
Exactly.
very
yeah.
strong.
Yeah. 3/2/2's, it's not that bad.
It's not that bad. Like you can't drop. Your opponent would have to drop at least like a 2, a 3, 2, 2 maybe, but ideally like a 3 drop to beat, right? So if you're bouncing a 5 mana card and your opponent only has 7 mana,
Yeah.
you almost can kind of predict that there's no way that they can come back at this.
And at baseline, it beats any token, right? It beats a 1/1
Yep,
Ortis
beats an
token.
Ortis,
It
beats
beats a
a
brass
Brass
bug
Bug.
because
Yep.
it has 3 grass, right? So
Yep.
yeah, it's a great card, man. I think
Yeah,
this is a
it's a
good
good
card. All right, the rare.
Yeah,
You get to use that effect twice. So
which is crazy.
obviously bit of a trade-off because you need to pay 5 mana 2 separate turns, which
Sure.
is a big investment. And now coming out of a reserve, your opponent sees that you now have this ability in
Yes.
reserve, so they can kind of play around it a bit.
Yeah.
But having access to this twice is still very, very powerful.
Yeah, it's powerful. I think to your point, like your opponent sees you, I think you lose that element of surprise, and your opponent may be a little bit more cautious when they're about to set up. They might not put all their eggs in one basket. They might choose to discard higher mana cards for mana instead of playing it, right?
Yeah, yeah. But nevertheless, really great tool to have with
Yeah.
a body. It's
Yeah.
it's really nice to have a body that
Yep.
you can put on the board with an effect.
Yep.
All right, Sakurabru. This is an interesting card. A very interesting card.
Yep.
So it's a 7 mana for a 4/4/4, which a 4/4/4 is typically pretty good, but you're paying 7 mana for it. So essentially you're paying 3 mana for the effect, right? So what's the effect? Your opponent's expedition facing mine moves backwards 1 region. So you're essentially slowing down your opponent and you're trying to have like kind of a pivotal moment where you put yourself in a position to kind of take over, right? So Akesha is a wizard. You might be stalling some of the game where you're not advancing as much and your opponent might inch ahead. As you get later into the game, the kind of way you play this card is, you try and flip the odds in your favor. But
Yeah. I think it's interesting, but I think for 7 mana,
it's really expensive. Yeah. Personally, I'm not that much of a fan. I think 7 mana can be spent a lot better.
yeah.
But
And it's not hard to beat a 4/4/4.
it's not. Yeah.
Because if you're playing a 7 mana, you probably don't have much else to put.
That's your turn, right?
That's your turn, right? Like, even if you play it and you have 8 or 9 mana, like you're dropping an additional 2 drop. I don't think it's gonna swing you that far, and it's just delaying your opponent.
Because you might set them back once, but you might end up losing both expeditions, right?
Exactly.
So
So it's a gamble, and if you can pull it off, I think it's definitely a funny, annoying card to play. But hard to pull off.
that's what it is. I think it's a fun card to play.
Yeah.
It's just not a great
yeah
card in
yeah,
that sense. Like I think it looks better than it really is, right?
for sure. Yeah.
So, and then we have the rare version as well. So it adds some stats, which
Yeah.
I think helps this card a
does,
lot,
yeah.
right? Like that's a huge difference now. A
Yeah.
5/5/5 is a lot more scarier
Yeah.
than a low 4/4/4, but it adds also card draw,
Yeah.
which is good. So, you don't necessarily have to replay this card just as a body. You can use it as a draw and see if you can, help your late game into drawing into something to help you close the game out. So, yeah, same thoughts. Like
Not
No.
enough, I think, to push it to like a super good card,
Yeah.
I think it definitely makes it better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. All right, so now we're getting into the spells,
Oh,
and I
beauty
think
sleep.
this is where Ysmir really shines because as a wizard, you know, that's what they're known for is spells, and Ysmir is going to have the access to the most spells and the most effective and disruptive spells. So, beauty sleep. So this is a out of faction rare coming from Muna.
Yeah,
Right.
cute artwork too. You see those little hamsters?
Yeah, are
Little
those
hammies?
hamsters?
Well, I don't know. They look like some sort of rodent, but very cute.
She's got a teddy bear. She's holding a teddy bear. Yeah. So target character gains a sleep. So I think a sleep is kind of a bit of a hard mechanic to wrap your head around in terms of how to play it. But you can play it in a few different ways. All right. So one way you could play it is you can sleep your opponent's character and win yourself an expedition. Obviously, you're going to have to deal with their card at a later turn now because it comes awake. But if you're trying to close out the game and all you need is to win one expedition and slow your opponent down from winning that one expedition, this is an amazing closer. And for 1 mana, like that's incredible,
Yeah.
right? I could even potentially see a play where you're playing this guy, you're at 8 mana, you play him for 7, you see what your opponent does, and then you can potentially put one of their guys to
And
sleep.
you win it. And
Yeah.
you win it.
Right?
Yeah.
So you've moved them back, so they can still advance one expedition.
Yeah.
But if you can close your game out, I could see that being a pretty good combo.
Good combo. Good
Right?
combo. You gain 2 spaces in effect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Great card. I think definitely every Yzmir deck should have Beauty Sleep.
I think
for
every
1
deck
mana.
will, yes. And then the other way you can play this card is you've kind of played out your turn, you've used most of your mana, and you're losing an expedition anyways. For 1 mana, you can put your character to sleep, and he'll come active next turn,
And you'll have a head start.
and you'll have a head start, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're going to lose that expedition anyway, so...
Yeah. And so what y'all means is like if someone's absolutely demolishing you on one side, say they've got like a 7/7/7, whatever, and you're trying to win it, but you ended up putting a 5/5/5.
Yeah, you came short, yeah.
And you're gonna lose, regardless if your 5/5/5 is there or not. Put it to sleep.
Yeah.
Have it come back next time, and then your turn, your opponent then will have to be the one that has to kind of work their way up to beat you. Now.
Yeah.
So you kind of turn the tides there. Yeah.
For 1 mana, that's a great card, man.
Yeah.
That is a great card.
Great card.
Coming out of reserve, it's going to cost 3 mana, and you'll notice in the next few spells, a lot of Ysmir spells will have fleeting on the card, which means that it essentially goes to discard as soon as you play that spell. So you only get 1 chance to play that spell. Beauty Sleep doesn't have that. However,
Yeah.
you're paying more to play it out of reserve.
Right.
But, you're going to get most of your value playing it for 1.
Yeah.
So,
I have this in my Druid deck and my green deck all the time. So
yeah,
I
great
love
card.
Beauty Sleep.
Great card. All right, off you go. Another powerful spell. For 2 mana, you send a target to reserve with a hand cost 3 or less. So this is what I was talking about where Dorothy Gale doesn't have any sort of restriction in terms of what you can target. This does have a restriction. You're paying 2 mana to potentially send something with a cost of 3. So bit of a value gain there, right? Your opponent paid 3, you're paying 2. Even if you target a 2 mana character, you're pretty even there. But it's a great disruption spell. You can play it twice coming out of reserve. You're going to pay a lot more for it at that point. But
Well, coming back, we're just going to take a look at Spycraft there. Just had to tune up the camera again. But yeah, Spycraft, we got a lot going on here.
yeah, Spycraft, another great disruption spell. So you'll see right away this card has fleeting. So when you play it, it won't go to reserve. It'll go to discard. So you only get to play it once.
Yeah.
You get to sabotage your opponent. So get rid of something they have in reserve and then resupply to your own reserve to give you more resources to play out after they play their turn, right?
Effectively a card draw, really.
Yeah, effectively a card draw, right? You're getting card advantage.
Yeah.
You're kind of passing your turn softly they get to play onto the board now, or
Yeah.
whatever they're going to do, and you've given yourself kind of more resources to potentially disrupt them further.
Yeah, and again, I think this is kind of playing on the whole Yzmir theme of you go first, right?
Yep.
Like, see what your opponent plays, and then boom, sabotage them for 2 mana.
Yeah,
2 mana, any card. This can work on a 5 mana card, a 6 mana card,
Yeah.
7 mana card, anything.
you're paying 1 mana to sabotage, 1 mana to resupply, card draw. That's great, man. That's good value.
Yeah, you could pull another Spycraft and sabotage from the reserve. Like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, it has fleeting, but if you resupply into a card with fleeting, you just play it out of reserve with its reserve cost. So,
So huge. I think auto include for most Yzmir decks.
yeah,
For
no, that's
2 mana sabotage.
for sure. That's a great card. All right, Banishing Gate. So another one with fleeting, but another powerful spell. Discard target character or permanent.
Yeah.
And that's one of the keys here because we haven't seen that anywhere yet. You can discard your opponent's permanent, which you're going to want to do against a lot of decks. Those permanents, right? Like they're permanent until removed, so they
Yeah.
just sit there. And if your opponent's getting value from a permanent for the whole game, you know, that can crush you. So,
Yeah, I'm thinking Ortis, thinking Axiom,
yeah,
right, where there's a lot of permanent landmarks.
yeah, exactly.
4 mana effectively means that you can take care of any issue on the board
Yeah,
and not send a reserve, straight up discard.
straight up discard, yeah.
I think this is one of the most disruptive spells that Yzmir can use.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a great card. And again, no restriction, right? It doesn't have to have a certain cost. It's just straight removal. Straight removal for 4 mana. Like it has to cost 4 mana, right? Bit of a
Straight
trade-off.
removal, 4 mana to take care of an 8 mana threat.
Yeah, yeah. You're not going to use this to remove a 1 mana threat or a 2 mana threat. This
Unless
is-
you can win the game with it.
sure,
But
sure.
in most cases, yeah.
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 All right.
It'll punch above its weight class.
Yeah, no, great card. Kraken's Wrath. So, powerful spell. I think a little more situational. So, what this does is for 5 mana, you're sending to reserve up to 3 targets
Yeah.
with a total hand cost of 5 or less. So, that means you can target a 2, a 1, or just a 4 and a 1,
Or 5.
or just straight up a 5. So, you're paying 5 mana to remove a 5,
mana, yeah.
which is fine. But the interesting part is tokens are considered 0 mana. So you could remove a 5 cost plus a token plus a token. Those are your 3 targets, and that's a total cost of 5 mana because those tokens technically.
But really, you're, say they're 1/1 tokens, and
you're getting more value.
7
yes.
mana
Yeah.
worth of.
Exactly.
I think it's good. I think it's situational depending on your opponent.
Yep.
And you might think that total hand cost of 5 for a cost of 5 mana to play is not that strong. You're flat. But keep in mind, everyone, that sometimes when you're playing on the expedition, whether on the hero or the animal companion side, sometimes you just need to win by 1 point.
Yeah.
And so you just gotta flick off a 1/1 mana,
Yeah.
flick off a 2/2 mana, and you've got enough to win, right? So I think this is something that you'd probably play towards the end of your turn when you kind of, again, use your after you.
Yep. Let your opponent
see
set
what
up.
your opponent does. Okay, they're all going on there, right? So I think it's situational. I don't think it's super strong because it's situational. But
It's
I
still
think
a good card.
It's good. It's a good card.
Maybe not great. It's good.
It's good.
It's good. And also to your point, your opponent might also, in between, if you're doing an after you, and maybe even play another 1 mana card out of your hand to kind of further stall your turn and let them kind of invest more resources.
Yeah.
They might buff up a 2 mana minion, right?
Right.
So now that 2 mana minion that they have has a mana cost on its
Yeah,
own of
yeah.
4 or 5 mana.
Right.
And you're removing it as part of just one target, right?
Yeah.
So-
yeah. That's a good point. It could be, exactly.
Like an
that.
anchored shroom with
Anchored shroom.
with those buffs, right?
Yeah, all the boosts. That's very good.
Yeah, or shroom and the spindle harvester,
Yeah,
right? On their own, not.
But when
super
they're buffed up,
yeah.
you get a buffed up shroom. It'd
Yeah.
be an issue.
Especially if they played it that turn and they're thinking it's going to hang around for another turn because it has anchored.
Yeah.
Nope,
Nice.
sorry.
I see.
Sorry.
Again, situational depending on who you're playing.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
can definitely find use.
Worth noting, it sends it to reserve. It's not a discard.
Right.
But, you know, again, if they have fleeting, it is a discard, and tokens is just straight removal. So,
Yep, exactly.
yeah, good card. And that is it, man. There's no more.
Wow, that was a lot. Definitely one of the things that I noticed with starter decks is that like most of the cards are somewhat meaningful, you know. And what I mean by that is in a lot of other TCGs, you'll often notice that you might get some really, really basic cards
Yeah.
that are just flavor text. And I feel like these starter decks are almost designed to have like a good base level of play without being overly complicated and overly quote unquote meta, but not being straight up useless out of the start.
Yeah, and there was a few of those that I kind of mentioned that you
Yeah.
know you might want to swap out, but the spells in particular for Yzmir, like
Really good.
you know, you want all these spells, right? These are all good spells.
Which is really playing to the strength of Yzmir, which is spell
Yeah.
slinging. So
Yeah, so one other thing actually I wanted to note is that there's different amounts of these cards that they actually include in the starter deck. So for example, the Beauty Sleep, you're only getting one, right? So this is kind of where you might want to build on top of your deck and pick up
Right.
2 additional Beauty Sleeps because you can run up to 3 of each card.
yeah.
So you might want to run 3 Beauty Sleep. The Dorothy Gale, where you had the common and the rare, you're getting 2 versions of the common, 1 version of the rare.
Yeah.
So you might want to swap into one or the other. You might want to say, hey, I want to run 2 rares or all 3 rares or all common. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where a bit of the deck building comes in. But
For sure. But out of the box, perfectly fine deck.
yeah,
You'll have a ton of fun. A lot of great looking cards. And yeah, let us know down below in the comments or join our Discord and our altered channel. Let us know what you think of Yzmir. As you guys heard, Jan is a huge fan of Yzmir. I'm not, simply because I'm often on the receiving end of a Yzmir. And it's not fun when you do have a buffed up shroom that gets sent to the abyss and losing all the boosts. So
super
deck.
fun deck. I love playing it. I love disrupting my opponent and just being a pain and being annoying and
Yep.
tilting them.
Yep. Tilt.
So
It's part of the strategy of winning.
yeah, love it. All right.
All right. Catch you guys later, and we'll see you guys soon.